There's a concept in astrology called the north and the south node of the moon. And this is, some astrologists think this is very important. Personally, I study this a lot. And this is about what is actually too much and what is too little in that color spectrum. And for example, let's say if someone's south node is in Virgo and their north node is in Pisces. The north node is it's the place where you find the Polaris, where the northern star is, right? And so that's where we find enlightenment and happiness, and also our what kind of lesson that we need to learn, right, in order to reach where we want to be. But the south node is that black hole. Is no matter how much you put into it, nothing comes out, but you keep wanting to put things into it because you hope that something will come out of it, right? It's a habit. And that south node is that shade of color that is too much because we're so used to paint things with that color. And we keep doing that, but no matter how much color we put into it, you never finish that picture.
This is Spirit Gym. In today's episode, Paul welcomes back professional astrologist and tarot specialist Letao Wang. Thank you for listening to this podcast, which would not be possible without our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, Organifi, and Wild Pastures. The sponsors' special offers and discounts are mentioned in this episode, or you can visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast. The topic of today's discussion with Paul and Letao is celestial deities, the gods in the psyche.
All right, you guys, this is a super cool day. I got my buddy Letao Wang back, and he is the author of the Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, which we spoke about on my last podcast with Letao. So if you have not listened to that, definitely check it out because it is really good, and you're going to find Letao deep and interesting. He's my kind of man. So Letao, not only would I like to say welcome back, but congratulations on the Oracle of the Celestial Deities. It's awesome.
Thank you so much, Paul, for having me back. Yeah, it's awesome to be here.
Oh, yeah, great. I've had a chance. Now, last time I had read 25 of the myths when we podcasted, and I finished the Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, and it's got so much red and yellow and highlights and notes all through it, you can hardly recognize it anymore.
I should send you a new deck.
No, I love this one. And I started a whole notebook, which I've almost got full of my own personal notes. So I would take notes in that, and then I would write down my notes and then things it made me think of. And so flowering, a lot of came out. And with this one, I've started, and you can see I've already got notes going inside of it. And, the first thing I did was I just held the deck up to my heart and asked my soul, and I hadn't read any of them yet. I just said, which of these archetypes or gods most represents me? And so I let my soul tell me. And so we'll talk about that later on. But I thought that was fun. And when I read it, I was like, wow, that's pretty damn cool. I did this, I did the same last time with the other deck, and I was blown away by that as well. What an amazing project. So that's your second one. And we'll talk later because it sounds to me like you've got more on the way. I think you're got a lot of creativity that's untapped as of yet. What inspired you to create this new deck and guidebook, The Oracle of the Celestial Deities?
So it's kind of an interesting story because I actually created Oracle of the Celestial Deities first.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as a personal project. Yeah, and it was actually back in long time ago when I just started actually my spiritual career, and that was back in 2015. And I really wanted to create a deck just based on the astrology and mythology that I've studied with my first spiritual teacher. And so I created this deck, and of course, I had to look for an artist, and there was a long story. The first artist quit, halfway, and I had to find a different one to redo the project because artists, the style is different, right? They can't really do exactly the same art, right? So you have to do it from the scratch. And so I've been using actually this deck, which I actually have a different version I will show you, which is the version that I've been using for the past 10 years. It's a smaller version, actually. See, this is Oracle of the Celestial Deities, right? This is what you have, right? That is a published version. This is my own version. the
Ah.
smaller cards.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And the one that I use for myself actually contains 24 cards, so four extra cards that
Ah.
I use. But of course, when we were going through the publishing process, we decided to keep 20 archetypes in the deck. So when I created this was really the first one that I created, because you can tell all the 20 archetypes are based on astrology. So they're planets, asteroid, stars, and things like that. And Mythic Hero was a much later project, but I published it first. Yeah, so that's actually the process. And so the reason why I created Celestial Deities was really to reflect my study and learning in mythology and also astrology, because I talked a lot about planets and history in this deck a lot. And I believe that these are really the foundation of the psychological archetypes that we need to learn and we need to embrace. The mythic
Mhm.
heroes would be the branches, right, coming out of that. So
My last one I read in the new deck was Pluto. That was very interesting.
yeah, it's kind of interesting because years ago, I remember Pluto was declassified as a planet. We made this amazing planet a dwarf planet based on
Yeah.
right whoever decided it, right? But in astrology, actually, this is a very, very important planet. And during my counseling sessions, I realized a lot of the things that my clients talk about is related to the Pluto's influence actually on their chart. The biggest thing is about fear, because Pluto, as a god of the underworld, he does create fear actually in us, right? And that is the reason why nobody was brave enough to descend into the underworld, because descending into the underworld means that we're facing death.
Right. When I read it, I thought, wow, this is a card that really feels like the last 4 years. It's like, wow, this is it's like Pluto's taken over.
Transformational, right?
Yeah.
It's scary, but it's transformational, and it's so profound. Actually, in ancient Roman language, Pluto means wealth. Right, so
Mm.
so if someone has a very well aspected Pluto on their chart, usually it brings them a lot of wealth. Sometimes in a materialistic way, sometimes it's in a spiritual way. It's about discovering the gold and the silver, right, embedded in the soil, and that's where Pluto lives. Yeah, it's a very important planet.
Yeah, very interesting. I love all these things, and there's just so many people out there. I would call them left brain dominant that think astrology is just a bunch of silly stuff, and just like they do with tarot. But it's interesting. I was listening to an interview with a very skilled astrologer maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she said something quite profound, and I'll share it with you. She said a lot of people don't believe in astrology, but I've never met anyone in my life that actually studied it that doesn't believe in it. And I'm like, there you go. That's the truth right there.
I think a lot of, right, let's just say the general public, right, their understanding about astrology more often than not is limited to the monthly magazine prediction. You know what I mean? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You have a small corner, on the magazine that says if you're Aries, this is what's going to happen for you this week, and that's their understanding about astrology. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I would call fortune cookie astrology.
Yeah, or just false astrology, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I think our media has really used astrology. I mean, of course, as an entertainment thing, right? I think it's fun, right? I mean, sometimes we all need a little bit, fun messages, right, on the magazine to have a laugh, things like that. Astrology is way beyond that. Sometimes I have clients, right, coming to me and I read their chart, and the first thing they say to me is, all I know about astrology is there's a page on the weekly magazine, whatever they are reading. And she said, that's all I know. So show me something that is real. And I said,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I bet you when you do readings for people, it kind of probably could be a bit shocking for them.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we're looking at is the natal chart there, which is a very complicated graph, that you're looking at. And yeah, you have to really dig into it and study the relationships between different planets there. Chinese astrology is the same. It's actually even more complicated because Chinese astrology studies a lot of fixed stars, which is beyond our solar system. And that's a completely different, a ball game. So
Just out of curiosity, the fixed stars, what would they represent? Would they be, for me, that makes me think of the North on a compass, or the North
correct.
Star as a fixed star.
Yeah, yeah.
So before we had compasses, sailors and people navigated the whole, all over the place. Sailors, they were always using the North Star as a fixed location. What would the fixed stars in Chinese astrology represent?
So Chinese astrology actually is, so if you're just looking at the stars itself, they have their meanings, right? Different stars. But what Chinese astrology does is it's almost a little bit like math. So they're calculating so they have a system actually behind what you see on the graph, and the system will calculate either the distance or the location of those fixed stars, and then they will tell you based on the question you have, and they will give you the answer. I haven't figured it out 100%, to be honest. There's a lot of things you have to memorize. I feel Western astrology is more graphic. So it is just what you see is what you get, right? But in Chinese astrology, there's a lot of calculation. If I show you a Chinese astrology chart, you have no idea what it says. And it's not because it's written in Chinese. It's almost like an Excel sheet, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, very interesting. It's from what you're saying, it sounds to me like the I Ching, where you ask it a question and it gives you an answer.
100%.
And I've got several great books in my library with very comprehensive mathematical analysis of the I Ching.
Yeah.
And
it's a part of that. Yeah. So in Chinese, that part, I think the Western equivalent is called horary astrology, meaning that you ask a question at any time, and by looking at the position of the stars, and that will give you the answer. For example, where's my lost key? Questions as simple as that. And in Chinese astrology, we have this study. It's a part of I Ching, actually. It's called Qimen Dunjia, and that's about that. You can ask any question at any given time, and the sky will give you the answer. Where's my lost key? When will I hear from this person? Am I going to pass the exams next week? Things like that.
Do you know who Terence McKenna is?
Yeah, I've heard of this name. Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the pioneers and experts in psychedelics, but he was a super, super smart guy. He probably had many, many different degrees, but he did a mathematical analysis of the I Ching at one point and made some predictions for the future. I can't remember what he predicted, but it was very interesting just to see his thought process about it all.
Yeah, I talked to a Chinese I Ching master this year, actually. I was very fortunate to connect with him. I was basically asking him a question. I said, well, I have got a book project that I'd like to have a contract. Do you see me actually having a contract very soon to get this project launched? And when do you see this happen? It was fascinating because not only was he able to answer all my questions, he even told me which direction this publisher is.
So you knew which way to walk?
Yes. He said this publisher, based on where you live, north, west, south, east, this publisher is this direction, from your point of view, standing in your house. If you look at the Google map, it's this direction. And I was like, okay. And it was. So there's a lot of geographical thing in I Ching as well, right? The location, because I think in the ancient days, they developed the I Ching for, to use it in warcraft, I think. So this is about, so they were asking the sky how to attack, right, the enemy, and where we should defend, and how do we arrange the armies and things like that.
Well, if you talk to that guy again, ask him what's going to happen in the next 5 years.
In the States, you mean?
In the world.
In the world. Well, that's going to get all of us depressed, I think.
Maybe not. Because there was some positive aspects to Pluto too.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, Pluto has been in Aquarius, right, since the beginning of this year. Now it's kind of retrograding back to a Capricorn, but it's gonna re-enter Aquarius around the end of this year, and it's gonna stay in Aquarius for the next 10 to 15 years. So there's gonna be a lot of transformation in the Aquarian age, right? So a lot of people say, so what does that mean when Pluto transits Aquarius for the next 10 to 15 years? I said, well, Aquarius rules modern technology. So one thing that we can actually see about Pluto's transformation is how we use technology, either for our advantage or, make mistakes.
To kill each other.
AI, all these kind of things. If you can use it wisely, it can be very powerful. But if you use it to kill each other, well, that's also quite powerful, right? So
yeah, I've always said that the issues of the world could be solved with the same technology that's destroying it by just using it with the intention to bring harmony and balance between
100%.
human beings and between man and nature. mean, we've got the computing power, even artificial intelligence, everything we're using in very adolescent ways, used with conscious intention to sustain and support life and even to create abundance for everybody. It's all there. It's just a matter of changing our orientation and also to doing some planetary healing work on the people that are behind all the nefarious stuff going on in the world,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. We've got a lot of things going on here as well. I watched this a Chinese journalist YouTube channel. He, reviews a lot of Chinese government secrets. And I'm in Hong Kong, right? And I listen to this every day. I'm thinking, wow, I never knew that they do that. It's crazy. Yeah. There's a lot of secrets.
You guys have some. Your government, I think, is just as crazy as our government, and that's the problem. We've got two crazies going at each other.
Yeah. I think they're really at the two the extreme side on the same spectrum, right? So they're criticizing each other. They're saying, "Oh, your system is bad. My system is better," but both of them are actually not really making sense more often than not. So that's
the problem is if either one of them tries to destroy the other, same with Russia, we're all dead anyhow, including them. So it's like a bunch of chess players that are all in checkmate and they don't know what to do about it, so they just criticize each other.
And hopefully the other one will just naturally die.
Yes, it's a triple checkmate and we're stuck in the middle, but oh well, so is life. Hi, everybody. Have you ever wondered why your blood is red? It's because it's full of oxygen and life force. It's what keeps you going. But what if I could tell you about something else that's red that will add more life force and keep you going? And if you start with a red juice before you have coffee or tea and wait a few minutes, you might find that you either don't need the coffee or the tea or you need less of it. But this time, instead of getting coffee and tea, you got a lot of nutrition and a lot of great stuff for stress management and detoxification. And it's so important. I got Drew Canoli. It took me 2 years to get him to come hang out with me and talk about this. I said, Drew, tell me more about your red juice. And he is right here to tell us what is on with your red juice. My kids love it. Everybody I know loves it.
Well, I love that we have it for kids. Because when I was a kid, there was this big red dude that would burst through a brick wall. And he was like, oh, yeah. And he would feed me a glass of 50 grams of sugar, giving most people diabetes, ADHD, addiction,
obesity,
all the things, right? So when we created red, it was, what's the alternative? If we could create something that could create lasting stamina, lasting energy. And then we started to look at our ancient ancestors. We talk about the Vikings, the people that were rowing across the oceans for days to go to war. What were they taking? Well, they were taking rhodiola. Rhodiola is in our red juice. And then we were like, okay, so out of all the mushrooms, what's one of the best medicinal mushrooms that can give us long-lasting energy? We found cordyceps. Cordyceps are absolutely amazing.
Yes.
Not just any cordyceps or rhodiola, glyphosate residue-free and organic. And how can we make it taste better than how do we make it taste better than that without the sugar? We added a little monk fruit.
Monk fruit's amazing.
Yep, and we found the best berries on the planet. Berries in high amounts, which we have in the red juice, actually help increase stem cell creation in your body. What's better than that for our little ones and for us?
Yes.
And so many people are just lethargic. They're lacking energy.
Yes.
What could we do for that? Red juice in the afternoon, 2 p.m. rolls around, instead of a nap, instead of the coffee, drink the red juice. You're going to feel so much better.
Well, if you need the nap, take the nap if you can, but then take the red juice to kick you back into gear.
Exactly. I love naps, and I love coffee.
I do too, but I love to make sure I got the nutrition in me first. The other thing is berries are a natural stimulant to the adrenal glands. So if people would do a little red juice before they do coffee and tea, they would pick themselves up naturally, except this time they're bringing in nutrition. And unfortunately, coffee blocks almost every vitamin and mineral you can put in your mouth. So hey, there you have it, right from the man himself.
To try Organifi's red juice and get 20% off your order, go to Organifi.com/Chek20 and use the promo code Chek20 at checkout. That's Organifi.com/CHEK20 and the promo code is CHEK20 for a 20% discount.
Can you give us an overview of the Oracle deck, its purpose and its inspiration? Maybe discuss the creative process behind the deck and what sets it apart from other Oracle decks on the market. There's 3 questions in there. You got all those?
What I mentioned earlier when I created this deck, it was really about giving people the archetypes that I've always studied in astrology. There are oracle decks on the market that are astrology related, but I realized that the guidebook is very thin. It's very simple, it's like 2 sentences and that's one chapter. Okay, the sun is this and this and this, done, next chapter. For me, it's a bit like, okay, but how can people really understand what the sun means? It's kind of interesting because I think you also mentioned, you feel very drawn to the solar energy, right? The god of the sun, Apollo. And I really want to talk about this planet from the mythological perspective. So, well, if you say, okay, let's say I like the solar energy, I like the sun. Who is the sun in mythology, and what kind of archetypes does he embrace? And by learning all of these things, then we reach the conclusion that, okay, so this is the part of me that is Apollo. Or this is a part of me that I can associate with the solar energy. And is it too much or is it too little? If there's too much solar energy, maybe it's not a good thing. So how do we balance that, right? Maybe we need a little bit more moon energy in us as well, the yin and the yang. And so when I created this deck, it was about not just talking about the planet, but it's about giving us the not just a knowledge, but a way to understand these archetypes better. It was definitely not an easy process. I mean, when I created this deck, because like what I said, the first artist to quit somehow, and he didn't quit, to be honest, he just ran away. And I had no idea why. Suddenly one day he was not replying to my messages. And I'm like, what's going on? And he was just gone. So I had to, but you know what? Everything worked out really well because the artist who did this deck, it's so much better. His art is so much better than the first one, actually. So I really thought it was magic. Yeah, it's which is meant to be, I think. I think the first one was probably heard some divine message and he just said, okay, so I should run away. I loved it, actually. So this artist did an amazing job for this deck. Every single piece of art that he created was exactly based on what I was imagining, how the deity should look like. So in front of me, for example, the first card that I'm looking at is Pallas Athena, right? You can see, the owl behind her, the eyes, right? Behind her, that's her symbol. And the armor and, the energy that she carries, right? The goddess of wisdom, strategy, rationality, strategic thinking, all these kind of things. I'm just very glad that I could do this project with him. Sorry, what's the other question?
Well, I actually just realized I accidentally jumped ahead one. So I want to just jump back a little because it'll help lay a better foundation for the rest of the question I just asked you.
Huh.
I'd love it if you can give us an overview of how the celestial deities correlate to archetypes and what these deities are and how they exist. Do you see them, for example, as non-local intelligence, egregores or thought forms, conscious or psychic energies flowing into us from the Zodiac archetypes, or something else? I mean, certainly I have my own perception of what it is, but I am very interested in how you, as the author and as a practitioner of these astrological and mythological arts and systems, see this. Like, I think it's important because, a lot of people can't put much stock in these card decks and they think, oh, you're just goofing around, or, who would want to consult a card deck when you got a real life problem? That's stupid. I've had lots of these types of comments. I even had my own patients. I said, okay, well, let's do a tarot. Tarot? What would you do? I got serious problems here. I'm like, oh yeah, well, I've got some serious tools here too. Do you see them as archetypes? Do you see them as non-local intelligence? Do you see them as local within the realm of classical physics, where it's actually a physical star creating an energetic influence? Are they egregores, which, as you know, are thought forms? Are they psychic energies flowing from the Zodiac? I mean, how do you account for the fact that these images written on a piece of paper are symbols that are connecting you to something that seems to generate meaning and can actually really change a person's life? Because if you listen to the advice, just to give you an example, I began using your Oracle of the Mythic Heroes deck with friends and clients because I wanted to see how it played out. And in every case, people went, "Oh my God, that's just mind blowing." One of the first thing I did was just go by their birth date and say, "Here, read this. This is, the Greek god that correlates with your birth date." And I think, mine was Asclepius. And I read that and it blew my mind. I'm like, "Oh my God, this is almost like somebody had wrote a story about me." And I've never had a single person come read based on their birthday and not go, "Holy shit, how could this be?" So I'm curious, how do you account for this? Like, what would you say is a scientific or philosophical explanation that somebody could wrap their head around so they don't think that this is just a bunch of airy-fairy silliness?
Well, I think for both these two decks, right, Mythic Heroes and Celestial Deities, I believe that actually all these archetypes are already in our DNA. Sometimes people say, okay, which card is me? And I say, every card is you. Every card is you, but it depends on what you're talking about and whether you have tapped into that talent or that potential. And this is related to astrology because when you look at our natal chart, which is, a wheel right there, right? Everyone actually has all the 12 different zodiac signs on their chart. So when people say, okay, I'm an Aries, well, your sun is an Aries, but you actually have all the 12 zodiac signs on your wheel, and they're all on the different cusps for each house. And whether you have a planet in that house or not doesn't even matter, but you have all the 12 different archetypes in you. But they might be talking about how you deal with different people, different things, and you might be showing different archetypes there. So with these two decks, it's the same. When we put a card, let's say Athena, we're not just saying you are Athena now, but we're saying, okay, this is already part of your DNA. And how would you like to express that energy in your daily life or in tackling a specific issue? That's how I see these. So I really want people to use these cards and read the books, not about, okay, how am I going to become this? You are already that. You just need to wake that up. And that's what I feel.
Now, I know you and I both have an understanding of archetypes that far exceeds most listeners. But the thing is I'd like to just ask you some questions that I assume will either be questions intelligent listeners would have they would want to know the answers to, or that by asking you, it would create a picture that would help others. So you've got the zodiacs, the 12 zodiac constellations. Aren't those technically actually constellations? Because they're in star maps all the time. So are they not, like, Leo's really there, right?
Okay, so that's a great question, Paul. Actually, it's yes and no. Okay,
that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, that's yes and no. So roughly it's there, but actually if you really look at from a scientific perspective, if you measure the actual size of each constellation sign, the difference is quite huge. So for example, Libra as a constellation is small, much smaller compared to Virgo. Probably Virgo is more than twice or three times, right, than Libra. So if you're just looking at the actual constellation's size in the sky, you're going to realize that Virgo covers like 20% of the sky and Libra was like 2% of the sky. So that wouldn't make sense when you say, each month that you were born, for the same 30 days, you will be Libra and you will be Virgo, because Virgo is much bigger, right? You should have maybe 50 days as a Virgo and 10 days or maybe 3 days for Libra, things like that. But the reason why we are dividing those things in 12, it's like cutting a pizza, right? Equally into 12 pieces, is not really based on the size of the sky, but it's pretty much we're dividing them equally, starting from the 0 degrees in Aries, because we know where Aries is, and Aries is actually the initiation of the cosmic energy. And so based on that starting point at 0 degrees, we divide the sky into 12 different equally sized pies, basically. And that's when we decide that's what the 12 constellations are. But if you really measure the sky, it's not 100%, because sometimes they will be bigger than that pie, sometimes they will be smaller than that pie.
Right. So step one is you're saying the size is not proportionate to the graph, which shows
Correct.
12 equal pie slices.
Correct.
But the answer to the question is yes, there are actually stars that represent these constellations. They're not just made up. They're
Oh,
not
absolutely.
imaginal.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And there are way more than just the 12 zodiac signs, actually. The reason why we talk about the 12 signs is because they're on, they're on the, what do you call that? The ecliptic. So the sphere between the sun and the earth, right? And that's how we see them. But there are a lot of constellation signs beyond that, like, for example, Hercules, Pegasus, Medusa, right? And things like that. We don't really count them because they are either above or below the equator level. Yeah.
And now I actually saw an interview not long ago with a guy who was talking about the fact that there's a 13th constellation that's supposed to be in astrology, but it had gotten left out. But the system he used included the 13th. And he said by including the 13th, you can understand the events of the world right now a lot better. And he talked about it, but I don't have enough astrological knowledge to really reproduce what he said very well. But the point I'm trying to drive at is this. Now, I studied, you ever heard of Dwayne Rudyard?
Yep.
Yeah, so I studied a couple of his books because I found he was very grounded in his explanations of astrology. But what he really talked about is that over time, people watched the sky like we watch television. They didn't have television, so they, spent so much time under the sky, and they lived outside. It's not like they lived in, apartment buildings like we do. They could probably see through the thatches in their roof at night, but they were watching the sky and carefully paying attention to what was happening on Earth. And then they started to notice patterns when a certain constellation is here or a certain planet is here. This tends to happen on Earth. So they really begin to, over thousands of years, see that these stars were generating forces that were actually acting on the Earth. And so he describes astrology as the study of these forces. Now, what those forces are, they certainly can't be electromagnetic because they're too far away. They could be, with things like the flow of plasma energy, they could be that because there's, massive flows of electromagnetic energy through plasma. But, there's a mathematical rule that the further you get a magnet from its source, the weaker it gets, just like electromagnetic pollution. So there must be another form of energy that's working there. And we know that there are archetypes as well. I guess the question I'm trying to drive at is, how did people really come to the understanding that if you're a Virgo, you have these characters. If you're a Leo, you have this. If you're a Scorpio, you have that. And how do you think it is that these star constellations have been assigned with and associated with archetypes, right? Because that takes a much deeper understanding, because people sitting under the stars 2,000 years ago weren't hanging around talking about archetypes and non-local energies. That wasn't even in their lexicon. So I'm curious, from your perspective, how do we go from stars in the sky and observations of nature to 12 equal constellations in the pie graph, all of which have archetypal energies? And how in the world is it, in your conception, that those archetypal energies are acting on us and be quite accurately?
Wow, this is a big topic, right? I think
Well,
this
you're
is
smart.
I think a lot of people who are skeptical, right, about astrology, they will ask me this question. They say, well, how does that star in the sky affect me? I'm not affected by it, right? I don't even feel its existence. There are different perspectives, but from what I have studied from my, different astrology teachers, actually, there's one guy, he actually lives in California as an amazing astrologer. I've studied with him for a while. His name is Gao Sasong. He basically talked about this question, right, that you just raised. He said it's not really about the stars affecting us or us affecting the stars, but he said the whole foundation of astrology is about synchronicity. So the stars are not really making you do things or making you feel things in a certain way, but it's a very synchronized system that whatever that is happening in our human society, it's being mirrored or reflected by the sky. And whatever the sky, what is happening, occurring in the celestial realm is also reflected by our human activities. So he said it's almost like two cogwheels moving at the same time. So nobody is causing each other. So it's more synchronicity than causation, if you know what I mean. And that explains why when people say, but I don't think the star is controlling me, right? And I don't think, that happens. Maybe they are right. Maybe it's not about who decides whom or who controls whose energy, but it's more about we work just in a very seamlessly synchronized way in the universe. It's a little bit like, for example, we have the cosmic regularities up there, right? The moon goes around the earth once every 28 to 30 days, and Saturn takes 29 years to go around the sun. Those are the rules, the regularities that the universe has. And we, each human being on the earth, is a little bit like a small planet going around the sun. And so we also follow certain regularities, whether we're aware of that or not. And so that's how I see this. Yeah.
If you've been thinking about joining the Chek Academy, then now is the time. The fall enrollment is now open and you can apply to join. Plus, the team at the Chek Institute have brought back the Open House by popular demand. The Open House allows you a sneak peek at the Chek Academy e-learning platform. You can preview some of the advanced training programs you'll learn in the Chek Academy, such as Holistic Lifestyle Coaching Program Level 1 and Integrated Movement Science Level 1. You can also watch segments from some of Paul's highly acclaimed e-learning courses, such as Scientific Back Training and Scientific Core Conditioning. So if you've been wanting to find out more about what you will learn in the Chek Academy and looking for an opportunity to see if this amazing course of study is right for you, then now is your chance. Go to chek.group/ChekL4D for the Chek Institute Open House and the Chek Academy Fall Enrollment. That's chek.group/ChekL4D. Your career will thank you for checking this out.
If we think that this may be mythological, it may be metaphysical, but really when you say, okay, well, what is Letao's body made out of? It's made out of the element of earth. It's made out of water. It's made out of fire. It's made out of air. You could throw some plasma in there if you want to, and it's in ether. When you break down the chemical elements in Letao's body, and I've looked into this deeply, it turns out that what you are as a human being came from everywhere in the universe. There is no place where I can say, okay, I'm going to go shopping here for this piece of Letao, and I got to go shop over here for this copper. So when they've done this analysis of the periodic table and the elements in the body, they say, well, this is oriented to Saturn from an alchemical perspective. This comes from Mercury. This comes from Venus. This comes from the sun. And then you say, well, where'd the stuff in the sun come from? Well, it came from every other star that ultimately became part of the formation of the sun. So what happens is you keep doing that. And what you find is, even from a physical perspective, every one of us is a product of the entire universe.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so the point I'm leading to, and to add another element, matter cannot organize itself. As I say to my students, you can stand next to a pile of rocks for 1,000,000 years and a Rolex watch will not jump out, neither will a toaster oven or a new car. It's going to take an organizational force. And that organizational force in alchemy is fire and air, because they're volatile. They make earth and water move. And then we'd have to get into the conscious aspects of that. But the key thing I'm driving at here is that there is clearly an organizational force that likes to make planets and likes to make stars and likes to make moons. So we would call that universal habits or archetypal habits. I have a lot in my Spirit Gym book series about the fact that life is a living mirror, that we're mirroring, consciousness is mirroring itself in our lives. And, if someone has a negative disposition all the time, then their life orients itself to make sure that becomes true for them. But if somebody comes to a counselor like you and learns to change their orientation, do some healing work, forgive people, their worldview changes and their life changes when their worldview changes. And that's just reality. I mean, I've been doing this for over 40 years. I've seen this in my own life. I've seen it. I used to have a hard time with money all the time, and my parents fought about money. But when I met Angie and saw how money just seemed to magically appear for her, I'm like, how in the friggin' hell do you do this? And she told me about her relationship with money. And I said, well, I want you to teach me that. And then as I started incorporating more of that, money started hanging around. It started staying with me instead of disappearing all the time. And I went, well, this is fucking amazing because the world's mirroring me back to me. And so in my series, I talk about the divine mirror. And so it seems to me, and this is where I'm trying to go, is that somehow there's a mutual interplay between the consciousness that exists in and as the cosmos, the stars, the everything, the planets and the moons, everything out there is also in here, and everything that's in here is out there. So it's like a reciprocal relationship.
It is,
where
yeah.
One's affecting the other and the other's affecting the other. And I do something to you and it causes you to respond. I say, how are you doing? You say, hello. I say, you're an asshole. And you say something other than hello.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, astrology always talks about this concept as above, so below, and like what you said earlier, it's also as within, so without. And so, yeah, it's every. I mean, each one of us is a small cosmos, I think. And,
yes, I do too.
Right. And so we're all interacting with each other's energy, whether we are conscious about that or not. And I think we have always been doing that. Let's say, every year, right, we have our birthday, and the thing we do is we blow the candles and we make a wish. And I think making that wish is about bringing what deeply inside you, and you want to, manifest that on the outside. And I think making wishes is just a very common thing that we do, but we're just not aware that's what we're doing in the way that it's about two energies interacting with each other and reflecting each other. Yeah.
Now, from an archetypal perspective, how do you perceive each of these archetypes, whether they be, because you've got the celestial deities, they're all tied to a star constellation or a planet or an asteroid. How do you perceive these archetypes to actually function so that they're doing something that makes that story real? Because if they weren't doing anything, that story wouldn't have any meaning.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you conceive, A, what do you conceive the archetype to actually be? And B, what do you conceive it? What's its mode of action in your conception?
Well, first of all, I think like what I said, all these archetypes are already in our brain. I think they're already in us. We just need to, be aware of their existence, right? And in ancient days, I mean, of course, mythology was created by humans. So when our ancestors decided how they want to create, right, myth and those narratives, they were really using that, developing that part of their brain, which is about the archetypes and things like that. But like what you said, it was not really in their lexicon. And so what they did was they made them into stories. But what they were really making was not really stories, was more about their psychological patterns into those deities, right? And then they project those things, their fantasies or their imaginations onto the sky. And they will look at a constellation, they will say, well, that constellation looks like a ram. Okay, let's call that Aries. And, and I think that's how we brought all those things together. Because the sky is the only thing that human was able to observe in the ancient days with a lot of clarity as well. And it was always there and it was constantly changing. And so, unless these days we have all the tall buildings, right? You never see stars if you live in the big city. I mean, in Hong Kong, you never see stars unless you go into the mountains, right? But in the ancient days, the sky was just right in front of you. And we've been looking at the stars and imagining things and asking the sky, okay, so what does that mean all the time? And when we are trying to understand the skies, we're combining that with our, those stories and the psychological patterns together. So I think that's how that works.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to share a conception with you that I put into Spirit Gym to help people understand how myths come about. But earlier, I'm just going to jump back. You said that human beings created the myths, but having studied mythology quite deeply, I think another perspective would be that human beings intuited or channeled the myths, because by definition, a myth is a story that tells itself. So a human being is either autonomic agent that's telling its own story, but still somehow doesn't know how it's doing it. But my point is that if a myth is a story that tells itself, there has to be something that has agency within the story. But because the story is so, especially archetypal stories like these that you have in your card decks, they apply to all of us, right? So there has to be a source of consciousness or intelligence that's telling the story in, as, and through all of us. And that depending on how we're oriented to ourselves and to others and to life and in relationships and maybe astrological forces determines how we express that story. In other words, you could express Hercules in very destructive and negative ways, or you could use Hercules as a force of justice or a force of good. But that would be your own personal orientation. And because archetypes, in my study, the archetypes are neutral. They don't say, I want you to behave this way. Yeah. You can be a loving mother or a nasty mother, or a loving father or a brutal father. And I believe all of that is God experiencing itself and all of its possibles and all of its potentials. Otherwise, God can never come to know itself. So in my philosophy, it's God that is the story that is telling itself, and we are the story being told. And the archetypes, one of the definitions of an archetype is a manifold, and a manifold, as you know, is something that changes one thing into another thing. So if you look at the intake manifold of a V8 engine, there's one major hole where a carburetor or a fuel injection system sits, and it turns that into 8 pathways, one going to each cylinder. So if you think of God as the one, then the archetypes of the Zodiac would be like the manifold branching into these 8 different expressions. And so the way I describe this in Spirit Gem is I say, look, here's a simple analogy. Think of God as pure undivided light. If you put it through a prism, you get a rainbow. And so there you have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Each of those is actually that same undivided light, but expressing itself in a different frequency range. And each of those colors and frequencies has a different effect on your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, and your psyche as a whole. And color science proves that. I use color science. Art therapy, I use color science and art therapy. So you can say each color is archetypal, but white has all those colors in it, black has all those colors in it, and clear, undivided light has all those colors in it. So what I'm saying is the story that tells itself represents the undivided light. The prism represents the material end of reality. The psyche is pure energy at one end and material matter at the other end. So if you can imagine, then this consciousness of source is looking into itself, and it's dividing its own consciousness into these archetypal realities. And because they're archetypes, they play out as they do in the same way, but uniquely different for everybody else. In other words, Leo is always Leo. Aphrodite is always Aphrodite. Achilles is always Achilles. But, your Achilles heel and my Achilles heel can be completely different. I'm just curious, how does that fit your understanding?
No, I completely agree with that. I think, when you say, the different colors, right? And there's a light there. And, when you put them through a crystal and then it divides them into, different colors. And then those are the archetypes. And this is exactly how I think archetypes work, because each one of us, like what I said, is a small cosmos. And so in our counseling sessions, we're actually put them right in front of that crystal. And so we'll be able to see the different colors actually in them, and the purpose of the counseling session is to help them understand where those colors are and how they can actually work with those colors in their life. And perhaps some of them actually lacking certain colors in them, as perhaps some shades of colors are too much. Mm-hmm. And so this could create a little bit, anxiety and things like that. There's a concept in astrology called the north and the south node of the moon. And this is, some astrologists think this is very important. Personally, I study this a lot. And this is about what is actually too much and what is too little.
Mm-hmm.
In that color spectrum. And for example, let's say if someone's south node is in Virgo and their north node is in Pisces, and north node is it's the place where you find the Polaris, where the northern star is, right? And so that's where we find enlightenment and happiness, and also our what kind of lesson that we need to learn, right, in order to reach where we want to be. But the south node is that black hole. Is no matter how much you put into it, nothing comes out, but you keep wanting to put things into it because you hope that something will come out of it, right? It's a habit. And that south node is that shade of color that is too much because we're so used to paint things with that color. And we keep doing that, but no matter how much color we put into it, you never finish that picture. And that's the thing. And so south node in Virgo then brings out the worst things about a Virgo. And so it's about being overly analytical, anxiety, the urge or the need to fix every single thing around us, and to not just to fix us, but also fix other people. You know what I mean? And literally, I've got a mother coming to me for a session, and all her session, there was no question about her. It was all about how to fix her daughter. And I was looking at her chart. It was a lot of Virgo in this, South Node in Virgo, Saturn in Virgo, Sun in Virgo, Moon in Virgo. And I said to her, well, do you feel that sometimes you are so drained because you're trying to fix everybody else around you? And she said, because I just feel responsible. I feel if I don't do this, things will fall apart. So I have to do it. If I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. And I said, sometimes maybe you just need to let things fall apart.
Yeah.
And then you will see things that you don't see now. And it was kind of interesting session. But also we can see the other way around. What if someone who has a north node in Virgo, which is their enlightenment, but their south node is Pisces on their chart. And then maybe that's the part they need to learn. They need to learn how to be more analytical. They need to be more healthily critical about things. They need to learn how to set boundaries and they need to be more detail oriented. But the Pisces south node is about escapism, running away from things, not wanting to deal with the problem, or not wanting to fix things, play the blame game, right? I didn't do it, you did it, that kind of things. Sometimes a Pisces south node could even be talking about addiction, drug addiction, any type of addiction that we have. And so, yeah, it's a little bit like that kind of metaphor back to, the thing that you mentioned. When we're looking at these things, we're looking at the colors, which shade is too much, which shade is too little.
Paleo Valley makes some incredible superfood bars that are a lot different than what most people think of as a superfood bar. I've got Autumn Smith, the creator of their superfood bars, right here to tell you about them. Autumn, what is so unique about your awesome superfood bars?
Well, our superfood bars are unique because not only do they not contain refined sugar or GMOs or any of the freaky additives that you'll find in most bars or gluten or anything, but they're just whole foods. They're low in sugar. They're made with superfoods like ginger and broccoli and acerola cherry and collagen from grass-fed and finished animals, which we all know is like a fountain of youth. And so the best part about them, though, is probably the flavor. They come in chocolate and apple cinnamon, and we have so many more delicious flavors to come, and they're easy to put in your bag to feed for you with your kids. And I hope you love them all as much as I do.
To try Paleo Valley's scrumptious superfood bars in flavors such as lemon meringue, apple cinnamon, red velvet, and dark chocolate chip, go to paleovalley.com/Chek15 and save 15% on your purchase. No promo code is required. That's paleovalley.com/CHEK15.
Your description of Virgo is exactly what brought me into a midlife crisis. I burnt myself out because I felt a deep responsibility to educate as many people as possible as to how they were making themselves sick and destroying their own lives, whether it be junk food or dogmatic religious beliefs and not thinking and asking bigger questions and always trying to take shortcuts to things that there is no shortcuts for. Like no one can go to the gym for you. I don't care how rich you are. You can't hire someone to go to the gym for you and expect to get fit. So I poured my heart and soul into the world, into people, and into my concerns about nature, and tried to educate people how the soil works and how farming really works and why all these chemicals are poisoning you and screwing your brain up and your body and your genetics and your children. But you see, just like you said to the lady, don't you get tired trying to fix everybody and fix everything? And I did. I burnt out. And so it took me 3 years, and this leads to the second part. And that 3 years, I did a lot of deep work in myself. I spent very concentrated time, oftentimes 2 hours every morning, just in meditation, talking to my soul, asking questions, getting clear, asking more questions. I went very deep into my study of tarot and did a lot of work on the Egyptian system, where you have to work with each of the archetypes and then go through the different pairings and then triplets. And it took me 18 months to do that. But I have volumes of notes of the amazing things these archetypes taught me about a lot. I mean, people think guys like me are crazy, but I've got proof in my own life that this stuff's real. So this leads to the second part of the question. One, I'm agreeing with what you said about the lady as an example, because I'm a Virgo and I live that. And I am someone that does not like messes. I don't like things that don't work. I don't like things broken down and staying broken down, and people that leave shit half done irritate me. I used to build my own race cars. I worked in aviation electronics, and those are not areas where you make stupid mistakes or you don't win races and you get people killed. And so those areas were very good for me, because that tendency to order and cleanliness and organization and structure played out really well. I won lots of races and I've helped a lot of people. But then I had to, this goes to your North Node, South Node of the moon. Then I went into deep self-analysis and looking into my own shadow tendencies, which I still have to do every day. But my point is this, it's a point and it's a question. If we invest, and I'm going to bring this to another point because it's very relevant to something bigger. If we really commit ourselves to accepting responsibility for our creative power that's given to all of us, and we go into an honest exploration, be it through astrology, mythology, classic shadow work, tarot, any of the paths that take you in and show you how to look at yourself and where to look at yourself and give you some awareness of what your choices are. You can choose to not try to fix everybody. I learned the best thing to do is wait for people to come ask you for help instead of offering it, because you can see that they're screwing themselves up, because they then feel criticized or reject you. But if they come to you, then they're ready. And I learned you don't try to fix family members. As hard as it is, you wait till they ask you, or you're just going to have a nightmare on your hands. So the point I'm driving at is, you talked about the black hole. You can keep throwing color and color and color into it. Nothing comes out. But my own experience of dealing with my own black hole is that as I went in there and said, okay, it's my own, some part of me needed to feel valued, wanted, and needed by fixing everybody.
Correct.
And that put me in a position of a codependent relationship where I needed to be successful. And even though part of me was saying I'm doing it for them, there was another part of me that was saying I have so much pride, we'll call it as a psychophysical mechanic, that I really have got to win this little puzzle, which made it hard for me to coach people, because I found hardly anybody, with rare exceptions. People like Jason Picard, for example, is a very rare case. Greg Shamaus, Mike Salemi, some of the great ones that I worked with that were really good students that really listened to me and did the work and made amazing transformations. But those are the rare gems that guys like you and I wait for and say, finally, we've got somebody that really wants to do the work. But you can pour just as much love into somebody who goes home and keeps eating the donuts and staying up till 1 o'clock watching their favorite show, and then comes back and just fucking complains constantly that nothing's working, which is why I had to spend so much time studying psychology and behavioral change. But ultimately, what I'm leading to is, I've watched this happen in my own life. I've watched it happen in countless of my clients. When you address the black hole issue and you say, okay, I've got to stop throwing so much yellow into this, and I've got to stop painting my story with black all the time, the victim archetype, poor me, then I believe what happens is you come out the North Node. I think all these things that we're talking about equate to some form of psychic gravity or inertia, which is why I say you need to have a clear dream goal or objective to give you the levity to overcome the inertia, not only of your own habits, tendencies, and archetypal forces, but that of those in relationships with you, because they can be a source of inertia for you as well. But then I believe that we rise up the middle. So like a tube torus, you think of the magnetic field of the earth. It comes in through the North Pole, out through the South, in through the North. So if we just say, okay, we can ride, as we become more balanced and more whole, we start to gain more levity. I think we can come out through the north side, and all of a sudden, the same amount of energy we used to put into trying to fix people, we have now liberated, but it becomes free to be used for other things, such as creating things for those that want to address their own healing. Instead of thinking like, you've got to do this, you say, here's an offering, and now you've got this freedom. You just put it on the table, but you've grown up enough to say, if you don't use it, it's not going to upset me. If you do use it, that will be fantastic too, because you're the one who's got the problem. So do you see that what I'm pointing to is, it's a question, and I'm saying from my own observation, I believe that black hole can be transformed into a white hole of levity by consciously participating. Yeah. And these archetypes that you've given us here actually do a damn good job of showing you right where to look, which is why I created that chart of correspondences that I gave to you, so you could look at the fire element, the water element, the air element. You could look at your birthday, and you could use medical astrology, look at the part of your body, or you could look at what I called the lesson, which would be the virtue, the vice, or the moral. So you can take it any way you go, and you're going to hit something, because we've almost always got imbalances in all those aspects. But there's almost always a common denominator where you say, if I address that one issue, it'll have the greatest effect on everything in my life. And me as a counselor, a therapist, and you, that's our job, is to find that one thing. If you invest some time and energy there, you're going to get the most levity out of it. So do you see, I'm asking, do you believe that this black hole energy can be converted to what I would call levity or white hole energy through conscious intention? And do you believe that when we really make an effort and we open our heart to it, that decks like this show up in our life on a podcast like this, and you read it and you go, oh my God, look at that. That's talking about me. I really don't like those qualities of Pluto, but boy, I'm right here with Pluto, or I'm whichever one. And there's some great stuff about me, but there's some shit about me. Like, I got to stop trying to fix everybody, because there's the synchronicity of it. And it's an acausal event where you don't know you're drawing this stuff to you. But you see, right now, there's a lot of people listening to this podcast. Some of them will only hear it at a superficial level, but some of them will say, Paul and Letao are talking to me. And I know I need to get those oracle decks and read them, because if what they're saying is true, there is a crumb trail I can follow right to my black hole. And then I can choose to create the levity in my life by balancing myself and coming into harmony with these psychic archetypal energies. So the question is, do you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's where we find the meaning, right, in our work. And I believe that a lot of the people who are watching or listening to this podcast, maybe they themselves are striving to be a healer. Actually, some of the people, right, in the spirit gym community who have contacted me, and they said, actually, I've always wanted to be a therapist as well. I'm also studying to be a counselor and things like that. And there's one thing that you mentioned earlier, which I really, really love, that you said it's about bringing out that awareness, the conscious intention, right, to change and to transform things in our lives. And I think that's the point about we already have all those colors in us. So it's not like I don't have it and I cannot do it and you have it, so your life is better or easier. We all have that. It really depends on whether we are aware of that, and we become more and more aware of that on the practical level. Sometimes I do that too. I also have my the bad habits that I wish I could change, but when I'm not aware, I do that. And then I realize, shit, I just did that. I can't do that again. This is exactly what I wanted to change. I do that. I mean, I have to be very honest. Sometimes with, let's say dealing with a client, right? Let's say, a certain client, you put a lot of work into the session with them, but after 2 years, they're still the same. and they don't change. And then we, as the helper, we also get a little bit frustrated. And this could be about us being frustrated with them, but more often than not, is us being frustrated with us, asking us, what have I done wrong about this? What have I not done for this person? Because they haven't changed at all and they're still unhappy. Because it makes us have a little bit self-doubt, or as a professional, helping professional. And this is also what I, became more aware, all these years when I deal with different types of clients. I realized one thing is that not every client came to me to change.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you have encountered a lot of clients that they came to you because of all different kind of reasons. Some of them, they truly want to have a transformation, right, through working with you. Some of them, they deep down from the first day they came to me, they have decided they don't want to change, but maybe they want a year so that they can talk to. They want a crying shoulder, or they want someone who can, hold their hand and let them know that whatever happens, you are always going to be there for them, to listen to them. And of course, it depends on us as a professional whether you want to play that role for them or not.
Right.
For some, right?
I'll throw one in there for you because I have 41 years of experience at this. Most people come because they want to pay you money so you will fix them so they don't have to do anything. You will do the work for them and they will leave. And the more famous you are, the more of them come, because I've had everyone from billionaires to the greatest athletes to movie stars, and they just want to get fixed. And when I say, okay, I want you to do 100-day gong of Tai Chi, they go, what? Oh, okay.
No.
I want you to stop drinking all this coffee. And here's the plan for, really? I don't think I can get by without my coffee. Oh, I won't be able to sleep if I don't have 2 glasses of wine at night. I'll just never be able to sleep. That's not going to work. I'll do these other things, but I'm not going to do that. So ultimately, what it comes down to is, and I've talked about this, I'm going to share this with you and everyone listening. Part of it comes down to our language and our mental structure, because we call going to a therapist or a doctor getting treatment. And you say, I'm going to go see therapist Paul for a treatment. He's going to work on my back or my neck or my broken heart. And I came to the realization, we have a language problem and it's causing us a lot of trouble. Because if you think you're going to go pay me for a treatment, that means I'm the one that's going to provide the service and you're going to walk away all the better. And the way I point this out to my clients and my patients is I say, if I say I'm treating you to dinner, who do you automatically assume is going to pay for dinner? And they say, well, of course you are. I say, so when you pay me for a treatment, you automatically assume that I'm going to do the work of metaphorically making the dinner because you paid for it. That's why I said to all my therapists and students, we do not work on a treatment model. We work on a coaching model, because the coach never plays the game for the athlete. They just tell you how to play the game. So this is why I say we don't treat diseases that have people. We coach people that have acquired a disease. So you see, I think we have a psychic disturbance because of our language, and that we need to get rid of the concept of treatment and get into the concept of coaching or guidance so that we realize we've got to participate. And I began being very careful with who's looking for treatment. I say, I'm not going to treat you. I'm going to teach you how to treat yourself. In fact, I will only do things for you that you don't have the skill to do or cannot do yourself. Everything else I'm going to teach you how to do. And so I think that's a major blockage that we all have to learn to deal with. And the second thing that I learned to do the hard way is I used to coach people and I would give them homework and, change this in your diet, do this gong. And I would always ask, do you agree to do this? How many minutes do you have? Can you commit to this? And then I would half it. They said, if I have an hour, I said, okay, I'm going to give you 30 minutes. And 99% of the time they wouldn't do it. Okay. So, I protected myself. It took me about 25 years to get smart enough to do this. I made a rule. If you don't do what we agreed upon, I will give you one warning. the next time you come to see me, if you do it again, I double my hourly rate. Because you're not taking yourself seriously enough, and therefore I'm going to make the investment more interesting for you. And then the next
I should start doing that too, actually.
It works like a champ. And then I say, I learned this. If I give you a certain exercise or stretch or mobilizations or meditations to do, and you come back to your next session and you haven't done them, guess what? We're going to do that together. That's what we're going to do. And you're going to pay me $750 an hour to do that meditation with you. And I learned, don't take people past where they're not willing to take themselves. And that gets people very serious. And if I say, I think you need a break from therapy, you can only handle so much. So here's what I want you to do. Take 3 months off. And when you're at 3 months mark, if you feel ready to be a good student and participate, then you get a hold of me. And if you don't do your homework again, I'm going to give you another 3 months break. And so I alleviated a huge amount of stress out of my life by having clear boundaries and getting clear. I'm not here to treat you. I'm not here to fix you. I'm your coach. I'm your therapist when you need a therapist, but I am here to teach you how to not keep doing the things that you're doing to yourself. If you're ignorant, I'll educate you. If you're lazy, I'll give you a chance to stop being lazy, because the pain teacher is going to come wake you up. You know, enzymes are one of the most important things we can use to supplement our diet. Very few people have normal levels of digestive enzymes. It's extremely common to be digestive enzyme deficient because so many people are eating cooked foods, processed foods, packaged foods, etc. The best digestive enzymes I've ever found are masszymes by bioptimizers. And one of the things I like about them is not only are they the most advanced technology for how they're produced, the science behind them, but I take them on an empty stomach every morning and every night as proteolytic enzymes to help clean my body. So I've got Wade here, who's the formulator of these enzymes, to tell us how do they work as digestive and proteolytic enzymes, because today I think we really need to be supplementing with high quality enzymes. So Wade, what's unique about masszymes?
Well, one of the interesting things is undigested protein is one of the biggest contaminants that cause problem for people, whether it's in their blood or inflammatory conditions or even impairing recovery. And it's quite common amongst athletes who have high protein diets, interesting enough, who are looking to add recovery, but they're not breaking down their protein effectively. And that was my case way back in the day as a former bodybuilding champion. So we set about cultivating and developing an enzyme formulation that handled all of the amino acids in a pH range from 2 to 12, as well as providing an assortment of assistant enzymes. In other words, it doesn't just break down protein, it handles carbohydrates, it handles fats, it handles fibers, a variety of different things, and they work synergistically together to make sure that you can break down just about any food and digest it properly. Now, when you talk about the difference between enzymes, there's digestive enzymes and systemic enzymes. Systemic enzymes such as like nattokinase or serrapeptase. Well, they don't help break down digestion, but they can break down inflammation or inflammatory conditions, undigested proteins, or scarring tissue inside the body. Well, it turns out when you take masszymes on an empty stomach, it works exactly the same way. It will go into the bloodstream and now works as a systemic enzyme, reducing inflammation, accelerating recovery times. Matt just tore his Achilles tendon and made a full recovery after surgery within a few weeks, which they expected for many months. He was taking as many as 100 a day. Now, I'm not suggesting people do that, but this was an extreme condition. And the bottom line is masszymes is great for recovery, for cleaning up undigested proteins in the system, as well for digesting just about any meal. If this isn't the best digestive enzyme or systemic enzyme that you've ever taken, you get your money back. That's the Bioptimizer guarantee.
And this month, you don't even have to buy masszymes to try it. Bioptimizers is giving you your first bottle of masszymes for free. Just go to masszymes.com/Paul free to get your free bottle. That's masszymes.com/Paul free to get a bottle of masszymes for free.
I also think that, for those people, right, who are waiting for someone else to fix them. I just want to say probably when they deal with a helping professional, we are definitely not the first one that they are doing this to. Possibly it's a psychological pattern for them, right? It's a habit. So probably when they're dealing with their families, their friends, they also have the same mentality, right? So you change me, you fix me, or I'm not gonna do anything because this is who I am. And people always say this, because I'm just being me. And I said, well, but that's the point. You can't keep continue to be you in this specific matter because it doesn't work for you.
Yeah. That's why you're here.
So, you're right. And so sometimes I look at them and I'm thinking, wow, that's how they deal with everyone in their life. And you also kind of understand why they come to you, because they have run out of resource, because people are not dealing with them anymore. So that's why they spend money. I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, we're all different. I mean, I think, Paul, you have a much bigger name in your community. So people go to you because of, what they have heard and learned about, your achievement. When I first started, I had no name in Hong Kong. And, when I started, I was in my late 20s. Specifically around that time, a lot of clients who are looking for a reader or an astrologer, they're imagining someone older, if you know what I mean. And they're looking for like a guy or maybe a woman, in their 50s, 60s, who can talk to them. Specifically, a lot of those clients are women in their 30s and 40s. And so when they come to me, they sit in front of a guy who's 28, 29 years old. They already kind of like, I don't know if you're qualified, right?
Yeah, skeptical.
To heal me. Yeah. Well, who are you, right? What have you experienced in your life to counsel me? And so there was a lot of challenge also, in my early days as a counselor, because you have to deal with this, the stereotype, right? They have in their mind about what a 28-year-old guy knows. Specifically, I think the most difficult client I've had was a female client who has been in very multiple abusive relationships in her life. So deep down, she does not like men. And when she talks to a man, she has this very subconscious defensiveness. She feels she already does not like me. Let's put it this way. She sees me. She feels you're a man. You're my enemy. And, it's a little bit like that. So it was very difficult, right, to counsel someone, to let them know that you're being there to help them when they already see you as their enemy. Because, of course, this is because of her past traumatic experience. And I don't blame her for that, right? I mean, once bitten, twice shy. So that's also, I feel, a lot of the clients, when we have difficulties with them, that's also part of the reason, they might behave in a very not very nice way with us, but it's also because of their history, right? Their family environment and their past.
Yes. Yeah. These things are all very true. I've had this happen to me, as you can imagine, 1,000 times. And I too began my career at 22. So the difference is I was training, elite fighters and world-class athletes. And so the way I got credibility was I just worked the shit out of them and won races and knocked people out in the boxing ring. And so the age factor wasn't such a big issue. They said, shit, I want to be able to do what this guy can do. And then it matured from there. But now I'm going to bring this to the big punchline that I was working toward. All of this, here I am 40 years now into my career. I started researching to develop Spirit Gym 10 years ago. I started writing it and developing it 4.5 years ago. It was born July the 3rd. The day before Independence Day was our first meeting, right? That was the day that Spirit Gym became real, right?
And yeah, it's a Cancer. Okay.
So, yeah, maybe, that could be good. Penny's a Cancer, and she's been just a blessing in my life.
I'm a Cancer too, by the way.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, my mother's a Cancer, and she's one of my greatest lessons I've ever had to work with. And so
I hope that's a good thing. Yeah,
I guess so. She's teaching me to love at a distance, in which I love her deeply at safe distance because it works best for both of us. But here's the point. I developed Spirit Gym with the intention to help be a real solution for the issues of the world that have been going on for a long time, but have gotten to a head and are dangerous now. But the orientation of Spirit Gym is, it's not something that we should realistically believe that we can do to go out and fix the world, because the world begins inside of us. And therefore, I built the whole Spirit Gym system around you. Everything you see that you don't like about the world, find it in yourself. You hate Bill Gates, find him in yourself and work on him there. You hate Donald Trump, Joe Biden, find the senile old man that's a criminal, pretending to be a president in yourself and work on them there. So the system that I developed is a system of comprehensive self-analysis, looking in, having a clear dream for who you choose to be and what you want to share out of love with the world, but that the real change happens inside of you, knowing that if you change yourself, you have changed the world. And that's all you can take responsibility of for sure. You can't change your mother. You can't change the government. You can contribute. We can hold hands and do things together, but we can't do more outside of us than we've done inside of us, because it's our own inner reality that determines the depth of our perception and our capacity as a teacher, as a guide, and as an influence. And I always remember Rumi's words: the greatest teacher is the silent teacher, and the greatest lover is the silent lover. Well, what is he saying? He's saying when you're truly a great teacher, you don't have to say anything because everybody's watching and they're learning by your very presence. And if you truly are a great lover, you don't have to say anything because your love is exuding from you. It's creating a field that harmonizes people everywhere you go. And that's why people go sit at the feet of gurus, hoping that being near the guru is going to fix them. And when they're near the guru, they're being brought into a state of coherence by the guru's energy. But the guru eventually says, oh, by the way, you need to stop telling lies to people all the time. And they go, oh my God, why did you say that? Is it true? Well, yes. Now you know why I said it to you. But you see, the point I'm making is if you really do the work, then you honestly become naturally able to teach. If you heal yourself from gluten intolerance, you know all the symptoms that you had, you know all the changes that you made. And now you look at everybody, you see the bags under the eyes, you see the wrinkly skin, the distended belly, the farting all the time, the achy joints. And you go, oh my God, the whole world's got gluten intolerance. But because you've healed it, you know authentically that it does work and you feel good about sharing it. So now it comes with an energy of coherence and people start listening to you, where when you were eating gluten, you could have said the same shit and nobody listens to you because you're not in coherence. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is I designed Spirit Gym to say, look, I would like to get a group of people together like Letao and everybody that I can find that really wants to make the world a better place. But we're going to start right here inside of ourselves so that we can carry the teaching, the truth, and the path in ourselves and go out and be in a state of harmony and coherence, because we're not asking anybody to do anything we don't know for sure works because we did it for ourselves. I think that's the only way the world's really going to change, honestly. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that approach.
What I really love about this, your creation, right, Spirit Gym, is I believe that actually by providing this very close community, right, it actually helps people to achieve their goals and achieve their transformation much better than doing this individually with a therapist, which with us. Because I feel that the community itself is the one to make people become more aware about other people who are sharing the similar issues with them, people who are working on the similar problems. And this kind of like brotherhood and sisterhood, I think it really helps us to change our mindset. I remember years ago, I heard about this experiment. I think the psychologist Jordan B. Peterson talked about this. I forgot who did this experiment, but they have two boxes, right? And each box is connected with two faucets, and they put rats in those two boxes. One of the boxes only has one rat in them, and the other box has 10 rats in them. And the two, because there are 4 faucets, right? And one faucet is dripping normal water, the other faucet is dripping heroin water. And what they found out after, so they let the rats just live in those two boxes, right? And after a while, they realized that the rat that is living by itself kept going back to the heroin water. But the 10 rats who lived together, nobody was addicted to heroin water. Sometimes they will go to the heroin water, sometimes they will just drink the normal water. None of them were actually addicted like the single rat. And so this is what, they realize that sometimes addiction or the psychological habitual behavior came from loneliness. It came from the part of us feeling disconnected with our friends and our community. And that's why even though we have the urge to change, we cannot change because we need that dopamine. we feel lonely and depressed, right? So by drinking that heroin water, I can get dopamine. I want that now. And I think by creating this amazing community, I mean, people admire you and people know those people have been following you for years. And not just with you, but also with all the other brothers and sisters, right, who have been following you. I think this will really create a positive environment for a lot of us. And even for the issue that we never, were able to overcome. Let's say maybe someone has been working on their, I don't know, drinking problem for the past 2 years, and they're still sometimes hoping, to drink, or they cannot really cut alcohol out 100%. But by being with the community, I really feel that this will give them a further push.
Yeah, I think too, the community creates a coherent field of resonance. So it creates a stabilizing force. And yes, everything you've said is very true. You've got hands to hold. You've got people that have empathy and compassion. But I think people that have a common mission, vision, values, and dream create a coherent field that is orienting everyone in that direction. Just like you can take a bunch of iron filings and throw them on a sheet of paper and they're random. But if you put a magnet underneath them, all of a sudden they come into order.
Yeah.
And so, my job is to create the energy that says, let's get clear on what we're doing here together. So that brings a sort of a coherence to the field. And then we each take our part. And so it actually is kind of like being in a boat that's going downstream. When you can get the stream to go with you, then you don't have to paddle so hard. And we each create the momentum for each other. So we actually,
absolutely, yeah.
Each one of us makes that stream of consciousness flow. And as long as we stay clear about what our mission, vision, and values are, then we're all moving together and we support each other. So that's really why I created Spirit Gym. But you see, the point I'm making is my orientation wasn't, we're not going to go out and fix the world. I want you to go to the government and lobby for this, or these assholes quit poisoning the soil.
No, we're not a cult. No, we're not.
But you see that approach has never worked. It's never worked.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, this is all related to what you're doing and what you teach, because I'm a guy that uses this stuff. Like, anyone that wants to come to my library can look at the notes I took on the Oracle of the Mythic Heroes and all the notes I took saying, this is how you can use this. This is how you can use this with this type of person. And that led me to making, you gave me a missing piece to a system I've been trying to develop, which is the chart that I gave you. And now it's very easy to use and it's right in Spirit Gym. So you have lots of ways to use this. And all you got to do is read these things and just look yourself up. And
absolutely,
it's pretty damn obvious. There's something really mysterious and magical going on here. And I think that's like, I'm asking you a lot of deep questions because one, I know that you're capable of answering them. But two, these are the questions that people often don't know who to ask or don't know how to formulate in their mind to get past the sense of skepticism or uneasiness. But if somebody explains something to you, you see, Jung says, real thinking is hard work. That's why most people judge. And if a person's not able to formulate a question or is afraid to ask the question, then they just judge and say, oh, that's a bunch of bullshit. But they don't really understand it, which is why I said earlier, people that have a lot of negative opinions about astrology are not the people that have studied it, because then when they get questions answered, then it's clear. Okay, wow, that's how it works. Okay, let's use it.
100%, yeah.
So I just want people to know from all these examples and all these deep questionings that you didn't devote your life to this because you're lost, right? You devoted your life to this because your soul inspired you to take this path so you could master yourself and share that process with everybody else. And that's what I spent my whole life doing, mastering my life and myself and my life to share. This is what I know works because I've done it and I do it. And I think, I'm really grateful that you're in Spirit Gym, because to have somebody of your caliber in there supporting people is very important too, because anyone that listens to this podcast is going to know Letao's the real deal. I mean, when I found you, I was like, oh my God, I found a diamond that hardly anybody knows about. I'm going to fucking share this diamond with everybody, because this is a diamond that actually becomes more valuable the more you share it. It's not a diamond.
I'm so flattered. Yeah.
Not a diamond you keep in your pocket and say, this is worth $1 million. Get the fuck away from me or I'll shoot you. You know, the thing about a spiritual diamond is the more you polish it and the more you break it into pieces and give it away, the bigger it gets and the more valuable it gets. It's like love. The more you love, the more you have. The more you love, you give, the more you have. The more you love yourself, the more you have. And that's the magic of real spiritual development. Now, Letao, I'm going to break the podcast here so that the free listeners, this will be the end for them. So you guys, I hope you've enjoyed this beautiful conversation. And Letao and I will be going for a little while longer yet for those of you that have the membership. And we're going to get into lots more. Believe me, we're only on question 3 of a whole bunch of them. And so I'll say thank you to all my sponsors. Thank you to any of you that buys anything from the sponsors that supports the podcast. It supports the planet because they all have high levels of consciousness about what they put their money into. They support a lot of amazing farmers, and it supports you and your own health and vitality. So we have a total win. The earth wins, you win, I win, and that's what love really is all about. So thank you to my sponsors. Thank you to each of you. If you really enjoy this podcast as much as me and Letao probably do, then I highly recommend you go to paulchek.com and sign up for the Spirit Gym podcast membership, which is just a simple $7.99 a month. It's less than, a coffee and a half at Starbucks, for God's sake. So, I mean, I would have paid that 1,000 times over to sit with Letao for 1 hour to ask questions. And so if you're ready to learn and grow with us, join the podcast membership. And I promise you, I'll do my very best every week to deliver you a lot of great stuff from a lot of great people. So I'll say I love you. Thank you. Letao, don't you dare go anywhere because I'm not done with you, baby.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. We'll see you guys in the extended play.
We hope you enjoyed the conversation between Paul and Letao. If you found value in today's show, there's more great content waiting for you in our special brand new Spirit Gym podcast membership. When you subscribe, you'll get access to exclusive extended episodes of Spirit Gym with Paul Chek, members-only Q&A opportunities with Paul, access to the podcast members forum within the Spirit Gym community where you can interact with other passionate listeners, and the opportunity to purchase exclusive Spirit Gym merchandise. Your support helps keep the show running and allows us to bring you even better content. So if you're ready to dive deeper and unlock all these amazing extras, head over to paulchek.com/podcast and become a Spirit Gym podcast member today. Paul highly recommends Letao's card decks, which you can find on Amazon.com. The Oracle of the Celestial Deities is at bit.ly/celestial deities. That's bit.ly/celestial deities. And the Oracle of the Mythic Heroes is at bit.ly/mythic heroes. That's bit.ly/mythic heroes. You can connect with Letao on Instagram at Letao Wang and on his YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Letao TKH, or on his website, thehealingkingdom.com. For more of the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast. You can also find details of the special offers from our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, Wild Pastures, and Organifi, as well as links to Paul's social media, his YouTube channels, and his blog. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.